Hey y'all, it's Jason from the D2, and we're extremely excited to bring to you the second season of D2 Talks. Today, Fabio is going to be talking with Daniel Flood from FloodSlicer in Australia. If you like this video, make sure to give us some love and hit the like button. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next week.
2, 1, and we're recording. I am honored to have Daniel Flood of FloodSlicer from Australia. I was really looking forward to do this interview because your name was one of the most requested one from our audience. So I'm very honored to have you here. Also, you are one of the guys that I remember I was looking at in terms of work when I first started to get interested in 3D. So I'm very honored and humbled that you decided to do this for us. So thank you.
No problem at all.
For as far as I'm concerned, for this year, we have a little bit of a different format for our interviews. We have 10 questions, which are standardized. And we're doing this because we kind of have this intention to compare what we get as answers from our interviewees. So without further ado, I just want to start with the interview. The first question, it's a very simple question. It's not a question, it's rather, do that. Try to introduce yourself in 2 minutes or less. Nobody has ever managed, but go ahead.
Sorry, no one's ever done it in less than 2 minutes.
Yeah,
I think,
exactly.
I would think it'd be easy. It's very hard to do in 2 minutes anyway. Mostly because the only way to introduce yourself usually is to talk about, maybe spend too much time talking about yourself. It's not my normal way, although my friends would tell you otherwise. I'm Daniel Flood. I've been working in, the 3D or visualization industry probably since the year 2000, start of year 2000. So I feel like I've been doing this for quite some time. I've basically started out working for someone. I have then run a company now for 13 years, just under 13 years. I guess we started as like everyone else does, as 1 or 2 people in a room, to now being a team of just under 50. That is located on three centres: Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane. That's the entire eastern seaboard of Australia. And that's taken quite some time for us to sort of slowly develop over a period of time. But I guess we've always been a studio focused on maintaining and creating quality. It's always been about not sacrificing that for growth. It's been something about trying to keep our relationships as we go, work through the industry, and then build ourselves towards something where we are today. Where we are today, I believe, is probably one of the more well respected and I like to believe, well-respected firms in Australia at the very least, probably in the world. And from that point of view, I'm very happy with where we've got to. There is still a lot more to do, though, and that's always what's great about this particular industry.
Well, thank you for that. I did not realize that you guys were actually 50. I thought, it was more like 25, but 50 is a huge number.
Well, I think the problem, I guess, some reporting that's been around at the moment about size and things. Size does matter, but size doesn't matter in some ways. I think overall, it was actually something Matthew Bannister from D-Box once said to me about 6 years ago. He said, you can only control the quality of a certain amount of people, and that side of things. We went from 3 people in 2006, and we had 15 in 2008 and a half, right? So that particular period of time of growth is often quite early. It's that point there, right there, where you either sacrifice quality for mass produced or whether you start looking at how you're going to expand. And I guess from that point of view, there's other decisions you make also, by the way, about what type of expansion that is. So from our point of view, it's actually about quality. It's about controlling the image. It's about creating the right environment where you have some control over the work you do. Various people do this different ways in the history of this game. Some people stay just making pictures for architects, brand companies, for developers directly, or whatever it might be. And others sort of go more into the marketing realm, so they actually control their images, so effectively their own client. I guess we've steadfastly tried to stay on this route of being artists, being creators of things, but we've sort of looked at the idea of complicating that out by becoming what I think of as brand visualizers without actually doing the brand. And that's actually a very difficult thing to explain. The reason why I say that is our expansion to that sort of number is not just 3D artists, it's having a whole wellspring of all the types of visualizers, photographers, filmmakers, film editors, post-production artists, and all while doing that, avoiding creating a pipeline. And the reason I say that is pipelines, whilst they actually demonstrably go and watch a Hollywood film, you can see pipelines work. They make really high quality stuff. But with that comes a budget, and with that comes the way in which that's managed. And I guess we've always seen that as a generalist profession. It's one of those things that's always been really important to me, that the artists that work here have the ability to find some variation in what they do. So I'm digressing a bit, but the point is that there's all these parts of the company that people can pick up and work in. And that's been an important issue, I guess, of when I say that. Are there now 50 3D artists? No, there is roughly 2/3 are 3D artists these days.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting to me because this is one of the topics that come up very often, actually. How do you expand with, keeping focus on the quality of the work that you do? And a lot of people, they decide to allocate some of the work that they do just to make ends meet, and they curate very obsessively the amount of pictures that they publish, to show to the world.
Look, this is the way I look at it. Have a look at our website, which I'm told I should change. It's been there for a long time now. But the point of the website was it's a database of all of our work. Okay, so if you want to go on there, you can search and you can find work I did in 1998, or sorry, my predecessor did in 1998, and work I've done in 2001. You can find the very first V-Ray image I made in 2006. Now, why have we done that? Well, because I don't think you should be ashamed of any work you do. I think your brand, your own personal visual, your own brand of your own company is tantamount to keeping control of the quality. If you are happy to regurgitate rubbish out for cheap, then that's what you'll be known for. So one part of the market, you'll think you're cheap. The other part will think you're expensive. In the end, the people that are the higher quality, more interesting work are going to wonder which team they're going to work with. And that's fundamentally the issue with scaled up sizing. It's also the problem with the idea that you don't, and I know this might not agree with many artists out there, but I guess I've been a strong believer in the idea that the way in which you create good artists is that you teach them, and that's not what anyone's going to disagree with. The disagreement is about the idea of hierarchy, the idea that you have a creative director and you have a series of people underneath that can train new people, but you've always got an objective eye on a project that you're making. So we don't, I guess the cellular notion of a structure where you just send all your projects off to different little groups of people and have a project manager just saying this is okay, or i.e. what is key here, just doing exactly what the client says. If you just do exactly as the client says, then the client's the artist. And I guess overall, I guess building that typical brand hierarchy structure where you have a creative director working down the line will always guarantee a great outcome. So back to my website, if you look at that, you'll see everything we do. And most places that pretend to be like us, and I do, and they're only, I'm not naming many, but I'd say there are a number, they'll only show the best 5 things they've done. That looks attractive to both clients and potential employees, but in the end, what do you know, are you getting, is the standard of everything you're doing roughly there? And I mean, am I saying that I'm absolutely proud of everything I've done? No. I have lost a battle or two in terms of the right music, the right colour, the right sky, the right whatever. I mean, but that's sort of for me part of the fun. That's why I still like doing this. It's about, I'm still on the tools. I've been working on this for a long time. I still edit the movies. I still help write the storyboards. And that's the real challenge. Is someone like me who was an artist, and I started out just doing the renders, this far down the line, still actually getting to create stuff, and that has been a challenge. And that's the real trick. How do you expand as a business owner and actually get to still be creative? That is a difficult. I think I heard I think you talked to someone from my lovely country, from Blank Canvas, where he actually said you have to make the decision to. I don't think he's right at all. I've spent a lot of time ensuring that I'm not off the tools. And everyone that I've ever trained or worked with would know that. They know that the issue, I guess, at that point of view is that I'm always wanting to be involved. Oh, sorry, the other thing is how to not be a micromanager while you're doing it, and how do you let an artist do their work and encourage that work while they're doing it, but at the same time I get to still work that way. That's the challenge of growth.
Of course, absolutely. I think, I figured that it might be a very difficult thing to actually do because, on one end, you want to see projects to advance, and on the other, you need to make sure that this works. So I can see the struggle. But anyway, we've been focusing on the first question for 10 minutes.
That's I'm quite talkative. You remember, I do like to talk, so you might be in trouble. Okay.
Listen, right. One of the reasons why we do these talks is, a lot of people come to us with a question such as, how do I make the decision to go into visualization rather than architecture? So I want to turn this question to you. Do you recall the moment in life you said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be an archivist artist?
To answer that question, I'll give a little bit of background. I studied architecture in the 90s, and I didn't do that well in the first. In Australia, usually it's a 2-degree process. These days, it's a master's. So in the first degree, I did really badly. I had a pass mark. I barely got through. And just coincidence of the world was like that I basically went over and worked at the United Nations for 2 years building websites. And this was just fortune of the right age, right time. Amazing experience being in a different place at the age of 21. Able to sort of experience this, and I started building these websites, which meant graphic manipulation. So the reason why I hadn't done well in architecture is I didn't like it. I didn't like the process that we're going through. I didn't like hand making models. I didn't like drafting with pencils where I had to rub it out and had to be meticulous about it. But what I did like doing, and this is funny, is that my very first ever computer assignment at university, I had to use a Word, as in Microsoft Word, and create a layout on it. And instead of just doing the boring columns, I found all the funny ways I could sort of make a layout like it was InDesign out of Word. And it was amazing at what you could actually do if you knew how to take those tools, manipulate them and rethink them through and create different outcomes. That's the start of it. Having done that, I then came back from the UN and decided that I was going to go back there and help the impoverished of the world, and go straight back there after finishing my master's, because you sort of needed that to get through the system of the UN. And what happened is I did well because I started working hard and I started focusing on the computer as a tool. And then I did quite well in my course. And why am I saying this sort of egotistical statement? I'm saying that part of it because I realised at the end of that course that the reason why I was doing well was my use of the computer. It was my use of representation of the designs I was doing more so than the designs I was doing. I was good at making sculptures, if you like, and then using parametric elements to sort of create these buildings. But really what I was doing well in was the presentations, and both verbally and also in a presentation sense. So in answer to that question, that was the moment, I guess, was coming out, finishing the degree, going into the workforce, deciding I wanted to do this work because I was actually now interested in the buildings. I was interested in what I was seeing around me. It's amazing when you realise, it's that moment, I think, in any architectural designer's eye, when you go out and you start seeing buildings in a different way. I still find this. I still went to Europe a couple of months ago and I suddenly saw Paris differently to what I saw last time. It was the structures of different types of buildings and how they worked in it. That is what makes a good 3D visualizer, in my mind. It's someone that can understand the elements and the objects around the form and build something amazing out of it. It is not, and in some ways, even if it's a really ugly thing, is how do you make an ugly thing look great? That is what makes a really good 3D artist. It's very easy to make a beautiful thing look good. I mean, not dissing Alex Roman at all, but what I've always said about that, whilst his execution was amazing, is that he got to choose the best buildings he could imagine and render those, whereas what we have to build is glass buildings that are 60 stories high with a very small lobby and tiny little bedrooms. So that is the art form, and that is sort of it.
Okay, let me steer you back towards my questions, because I see you're already giving a lot of value and you're touching on some of the points that I've already listed. But anyway, it's okay. I think that people, will have to just listen and go with it.
Oh, I'm sorry if I am Australian, so I talk very fast and I tend to mumble personally. So if I'm not clear, please tell me.
I've had already the chance to interview a couple of Australian guys, and that was the biggest comment. Okay, what do you think was the biggest turning point in your career?
So it's a hard question. Probably that moment where I went from deciding to be an architect to working. And by the way, when I went to work, I didn't start as a visualizer so much as back then I went to work in a photographic studio of the best known architectural photographer in Australia with my now former business partner, Sam Slicer. And so we were working for a photographer at first, a well-known one in Australia. And I guess that moment is it. The other moment, of course, is when I started the FloodSlicer. It was amazing how being in control of the project and how fast that we turned from being just doing montages into the whole suite of the types of work that we do today.
It's very interesting, and probably I should find a way to pick your brains some other times, because there are so many things that I would like to ask you, but because of the interview, we'll have to move on. And
Sure.
this is something that I'm very interested to find out. What do you think you attribute your success to? And what do you think that makes your firm different from others? And I'm saying this because I think that per se, being in business for this long is a huge success of its own, despite the fact that you have done incredible work and you've been able to differentiate the production and the stuff that you do in-house. But what is your take? What do you think was that differentiate you?
I do think it's the production value. I do think it's the photographic background. I do think that now, the reason I say that is the time. Do you know what's funny actually about the work is that when I'd say what's our very first video render, well, that was 2006. Okay, and Vero came out only a year or two beforehand. We were a bit late. We were a bit sluggish. I liked radiosity too much. And I know that might sound strange to everyone because no one out there, apart from the very old hats, would even know why you would even think of that. But why I'm saying that is that what has changed is not so much that the technology's changed that much. Computer speeds have built up. Some plugins have been improved. The ability of Vero and say the addition of Corona as a sort of standard used sort of engine has meant that a lot of that computer-based control mechanism I see it as image making. So and I'll probably raise this as my. There's a term CGI out there, which I personally find not a nice term. I find it that where it comes from is from brand and marketing. The idea that the computer is generating the image. The reality is that humans are generating an image, and the computer is the tool that we're using it with. It's a lot like saying a photographer is generating a picture out of a camera. So why is that not called a CGI? Because it's a camera generated image, and often this idea that somehow good image making or good filmmaking is built out of the computer controlling mechanism is the issue. And we have steadfastly stayed with the fact that the designer, the 3D visualizer or the artist is actually a designer. The way in which we deliver our work is almost always about what design value you bring to the equation and what is the best tool to use in the situation. Most often it is the base tools like Max and Vero or whatever, but it is their thought process that I think is lost, I guess, in the automation process of a lot of other places I could name. And the idea that you might tell artists they have to do 2 renders a week, or you might tell them they have to do, there's like schedules and fine. I mean, how can you say do 2 renders a week when 1 render might take you a whole week because it's amazing and the amount of detail you put into that, and then another one, is that worth the same? Well, to clients, is it worth the same? It's the understanding that the humans run the process. That's sort of where I see the real difference. I do think, though, because we built our mechanisms, it is interesting. I've noticed other people in interviews mentioning the idea that there is stills and film attached to a job, and what I find interesting about that is it's not, it's something I think FloodSlicer introduced specifically into the market in Australia, which is the way we do things here, which we effectively, because of our longevity and how long we're doing for, sort of built this idea that the rendering company does the films as a natural course and order of the events. That was not the case 10 years ago. We were just animators that made animations that other film companies put the films together for. And I guess the assumptions that have been made over a period of time is that is the bit that I think that I've tried to add as much as I can into, which is this idea that we are designers. We are not. We are able to value add. We are able to create difference. And it's the thing I am most disappointed on when I see other places espousing the idea that somehow you can manufacture that just using a computer, or by having a factory setting effectively with the way your artists are working.
No, I totally agree with that, and I really like also what you said about, humans having their own tempo to create stuff, and this is something that I also try to make my clients understand, that you kind of have to direct the project based on your own human physiology. You cannot simply say, I'm going to give you a picture in 2 days because, it's going to rush you. And maybe in the beginning you'll have to do that because you need to start your business and you're trying to do everything that you can to make people happy. But at one point you got to stop and you got to accept the fact that you're human and you need to have the amount of time.
I often look for artists, and I question them what is their favourite image they do, and are you happy, and do you think you finished it? And I very clearly say that, because at the end of the day, if you think you finished something, then often the reason for finishing, or almost always, is because there's a deadline sitting there. You should be able to work on something forever, as in there's always something that hasn't been working there. So that aspiration of making it as good as it could possibly be should be the driving force of the artist. It should be that the time clock has clipped over at the end of the day. To me, it should never be the reason why you stop working on something. It should always be about when the image has reached that point where, or the film or whatever has reached a point where it can't easily get better. It's like it's got to be the right time, and you've got to think that through. And really, about doing that is actually often mostly about client management. It's about and really what that is simply getting respect out of clients. And you can't get respect out of clients if you sometimes give them rubbish and then sometimes give them good. That's sort of the fundamental. There was one other thing you asked, which how do I think we could build this, is simply I worked hard. Matter of fact, I think a lot of the people early on in the place felt that they should overwork on the basis they felt I was a workaholic, but I didn't see it that way. The logic I just told you is how I've always seen making an image. Like, I just personally did not want to go home until it was ready. I used to work through till if the deadline was there, I would do all-nighters early on. I certainly don't do them now, and I certainly don't expect that out of any staff that work here anymore, and no one really does. Actually, part of the trick is once you get bigger, it gets easier, is managing the place such that people don't have to work outside hours. And that's really, very rarely.
I like where you're going right now, because the next question is actually about mental sanity. And, very often when I remember, especially in the beginning of me starting this career, when I would bring up the topic, people would laugh about it because, they will be like, oh, don't be such a pussy, you gotta work hard and blah, blah, blah. But time proved me right. So, in terms of mental sanity, working in this field can be very stressful. Working long hours, clients coming with weird requests, having to negotiate, compromise, optimize. How has this profession been affecting you personally? And what are the things that you have learned? And how do you maintain your head above the water? Because I don't think when you have a company of 50, it's only about the quality of work. It's also about the well-being of 50 human beings that rely on you.
Okay, I think there's two parts. There's multiple parts to that question. I think there's my own mental health, sanity, which I mean, to be honest, there's a rising tide of competition in Australia that didn't really exist 5 years ago. There's a lot of, I mean, every other studio you can name in Australia only really appeared since 2013, or in a visible way anyway. So from that point of view, from me running a business with a sense, then I've had to change the way we're working and that's added a bit of stress here and there. But at the end of the day, that's that's an expectation of any industry that you're in. I guess the true answer is that everyone deals with these things differently. I mean, different types of personalities. I think one of the real things about HR-related elements in an office is that. And I think especially true of creatives, 3D artists, those sorts of things, is they all need different things. And the answer to that question is many and varied. You've got some people who desperately love working on the images, and if you told them to go home, seriously, go home, that actually probably might stress them out more than if they were just left to finish the picture. And that line of understanding, it's actually understanding the human, being able to empathise with stuff. I mean, some people may say I don't do that very well, but in my view, I've always tried to look at the fact that it's all very many and varied. I mean, the vast majority of people want to be able to come into work and then go home at the right time. I guess within the hours of the workplace, sometimes it's stressful, sometimes it isn't. There are periods of time when there's high workflow and lower workflow. Often I've actually found, by the way, where people seem to be most affected and maybe some of the work culture goes down is actually often after a heavy work period when suddenly there's less work in the office. And it's that less work where people start getting idle that often people start feeling actually the residual stress. And it's really interesting as you see more. I mean, I've probably had 200 people work through. I think I haven't done the maths, but it's probably high hundreds, I'd say, over the last 12 years. And I'd say, as I say, it's just different. And I can't really answer it in one straight answer. I try and build an umbrella for all those different types of people if I can. And it's nothing's perfect, but we try. That's the way it is.
Good enough. Let me ask you. If I were to appeal to you as both the artist and the entrepreneur, if I asked you what scares you the most regarding, managing a business like yours, what would your answer be? Okay,
so I'm going to go back to that thing about let's call it the factory setting studios. Back in about 2000, and I can't remember 4, 3, something like that. The companies like I Draw Fast and others sort of appeared on the scene, and they were issuing out renders for a few $100s based out of China and all that sort of stuff. And we sort of weathered this storm because the GFC, or whatever you call it in whatever country, the GFC hit, and then suddenly everyone retracted. What we found is we actually grew at that period of time because we were focused on quality. So therefore people thought, well, to get better marketing materials, I'm going to spend a bit more money, or I'm not going to build the display suite, or I'm not going to. So we actually benefited from a process where everyone else shrank at the same time. Why am I saying that? Because I actually think, look, every market is localised into where it's at. Australia is in particular, because it didn't really have a recession at any point, has tended to receive a whole bunch of investment from other locations. It's effectively buoyed our market really high over the period of time. It's very clear that's not going to last that much longer. So I guess what's fear in terms of answering your question is what's going to happen now, because various other companies have scaled up and sized, and including my own ex-staff. I mean, one of my proudest achievements, I think, is that a whole bunch of the leaders of the studios that are here are all my ex-alumni, as I think of them. Well, I don't think of them that way. I say it to them, and it annoys most of them. But it is sort of one of those sorts of thought processes. I mean, everything from the FKDs to all the leaders came through here, and the leaders of the Melbourne studio, Vienna, and all those. They're all learnt at in our way. And I guess from that point of view, I'm proud of the fact that I've influenced an industry so strongly here. Whether or not it's influenced overseas, I don't know. So anyway, back to the question. The question, or the answer to that particular question is, it's what happens now, because it's been very, very profitable, very lots of work. We, therefore, as a community in Australia, haven't necessarily needed to focus outside Australia. What happens if it's not just flying here? What happens? So, I mean, I guess that's probably it. The other thing I would say also is I was getting to the point of the types of rendering engines and things is the one-touch solutions. I actually gave a talk at a BIM conference about 2 months ago where where the first slide I put up there was, why do I still have a job? And the reason I asked that question is that all the technology sitting there, I can't see any reason why a Revit or someone else couldn't just press a button and suddenly got a photoreal render out there. It's just that no one wants to put it together. And I'll tell you why I've still got a job, because photographers still have jobs. And I guess that's the thing, that's my answer to the question is how do you weather that, is make sure you stay true to the quality, make sure you realise that you're an artist or a designer, and make sure that the computer is not dominating, because if you do, then give it 5 to 10 years, the computer, all the real-time engines, all the other stuff, they're all going to generate the outcomes for you if you're not creative. If the computer's doing the work, then just get a computer to do it. That's sort of what I'm saying.
I agree 100%, and if I may add, it's also a question of I don't know. Sometimes I really think that people really focus only on the technical aspect, and they don't understand the why they're doing what they're doing. So a lot of images, and I see this because I get contacted 3 or 4 times a week from people that want me to review their portfolios. And you see the image, it's perfect, like light balance, color composition. But then you look at the purpose that the image has, and you see no purpose. And you're like, you're producing value without value.
So, look, the simple as this. Whether or not the artist has come through an architecture stream, studied interior design, whether or not, the other creative director here, James Orchard, is an industrial designer by trade, and I guess he's in love with the object. It sort of effectively creates him what he is, which is a better stylist than everyone else. And maybe that's the point I say, is that, part of that understanding is having periodicals of conventional built outcomes, like make sure staff should be reading things like interior design brochures. Don't expect all that information to come from external interior designers. That the external interior designers have one way of looking at it, but they don't necessarily understand the limitations of 3D work. We find that over time that more and more we are always controlling all the styling elements of all the projects we do. We encourage this. It's actually easier as well, but that trust is just like trying to get a client to trust you to make a film in the first place. Is they don't necessarily think as CG artists that you are a designer of the real. So therefore they don't trust you to do that sort of side of the role. So that's one of the challenges is to build that trust in all facets of what makes this job good. No, that's probably just another point.
Daniel, let's keep it a little bit vague. If you could go back in time, is there something that you would change about your life? And it can be personal, it can be work related. Now, basing yourself on the experience that you've had throughout your life, if you could go back, one thing that you would change?
I don't know if I can. I think you're in a position in your life where you think, well, I made a bad decision. If I was going to keep it simple, I'd say I wouldn't have had a child when I was 23 years old while trying to build a business straight afterwards. But then again, he's now 20, by the way, so I'm not, the dual obligations of that stuff I wouldn't have put upon myself. But then again, it happened. And so I can't say I made the wrong decision one night in Dar es Salaam, walking while I was travel backpacking through there, which brought this about. But that in a sense is just one of those things. It's about what are the focuses of the love of life. Can you focus on that? I mean, I'm actually having my 4th child in February at the moment, and
congratulations.
20 years apart, and I don't think many people would necessarily take that problem. As a matter of fact, I had my first child while I was studying architecture at university, and the amount of people I see from my people I studied architecture with who say, "Oh, how old's Tamash?" And I say he's 20, and they go, "Oh my God, time has passed." And it is interesting as you watch time fly by. That now I'm in my 40s. I started doing this in my early 20s, and here I am. It is a very interesting process. So I don't know if there's an easy answer in terms of the business. Would I change? What would the process? Yeah, I would absolutely say major stuff up was actually not trusting that we do very well. So we just didn't set up the company structure right. So I've actually literally had to spend 2 years, 10 years down the track restructuring the whole company at great expense so that it operates a lot more. So yeah, if you're going to start this stuff up, then seriously spend the $2,000 to get a trust fund or whatever it is in whatever country you're in. It was interesting how stupid some of those things are in retrospect. Because I wasn't a businessman, I was an artist. Still am. But I've got a lot of experience now running a company. It's just the way it is. Okay.
That's very interesting, and maybe I'll have to ask you in private a little bit more about that kind of stuff. But it's okay. Let's move on, even because we've been already past the 30 minutes slot. But it's fine. I think you're giving me a lot of value, and I cannot wait to share this with my audience. One of the things that might be very interesting for people looking for a job. How do you recognize people that can bring value to your firm? And what is your criteria for choosing your staff? So if somebody wants to apply for a job, what are the skills that you're looking for?
I don't think of, sometimes when people have left, okay, like you've got a key staff member maybe who's moved on or started their own company or whatever they've done, which has happened a number of times. So that type of person is very different from, say, a beginning type of person. I mean, what I want to see in a beginning type of person, recent graduate or whatever, and we have a graduate program, and we've always got at least 2 or 3 university graduates being trained at any one time. We've always done that, mostly because that's, well, the bad habits don't exist. The bad habits don't exist. I mean, I look at passion for the art, but I also look at passion for architecture if I can get it. Okay, and not always a combination that exists. I used to have this, probably more so 10 years ago, before this industry really became more mature and a bit older. It's not mature. I don't think it's mature now, by the way. I think it's still very young. But way back in the day, I used to look at the types of books of CG art and think, oh, who is making this? It's people who think naked women with snakes on them is a good piece of art. It's the type of mentality of the type of 3D artists that are out there, and. So trying to crack that idea that doing computer work is technical work versus computer being a designer's work means that the things I'm usually looking for are the people who have come to the idea that have, whether or not they've done a good job of it, they've come to the idea that they see the computer as their tool, and they see where they want to go is beautiful images of buildings or beautiful images of environments. That's the rendering side of it. If I'm thinking about animators and those sorts of things, it's actually trying to see how fast their mind is. The real interesting thing about animation, as opposed to some of the other elements, is that it's the ability to think laterally with the series of tools you have at your hand. It's a very different skill set than the skills that you have to, say, do a rendering. That being said, everyone gets a go doing animation, but that much more complex stuff where you see things growing and building or turning into water or those sorts of things, they tend to be done best by certain types of people, and I do look for those as well.
What about maturity? Is there something that you expect from the people that work with you? One of the things that I find my client have struggle with is finding people which are reliable. To which you can give a task and be sure that the task is delivered in the same way as you would yourself for your own client. Because, it's very difficult to transfer the responsibility that you have onto somebody that works for you.
I think it's difficult to ever know that, and the only way you can know is via reference from people who have worked with them before. But even then, I mean, you can look at them. Often also with portfolios and things, you might receive a series of high quality renderings, but you don't really know often whether or not they've done them all themselves. One solution's always been give them a test, but that's not particularly. They can always get their friend to do it for them. I mean, there's just multiple ways in which makes it difficult. But in terms of responsibility. Again, it's working with them. You've got to get to know them, and then you see the ones that are clearly have. To be honest, it is often about a personality that wants to tick all the boxes, but at the same time get creative while they're at it, and that's one of those things you pick up over. I think you pick up over time. Also, a lot of people, because it's difficult at first to understand all the technical aspects, may not give you that flair, that flourish of thing that means that they can be both manager and creator at the same time, and it's a very rare component of what's out there, and once you see it in someone, then it's very unfortunate if you haven't taken advantage of that when you see it. Very hard to pick that, I find.
I agree, and also probably it's a very good segue to our next question. One of the things that we understood from interviewing other people and talking to the community is that one of the biggest frustrations for artists doing this job is the very slow advancement in career. And I don't think personally that it's slow. It's just that people don't really understand what it takes to grow as an artist. And
I think all the people who think that need to sit and have a look at how slow architects are to get to the top of their profession. I actually think most artists believe they should have everything very, very fast. I often try and raise the issue, but no one listens to me when I say, what are you now, 28 years old, and you're gonna if you're still doing this at 75, what's the rush? You need to take it in. It's like because if you think in 2 years you're an expert, well, maybe you are at the moment, but the fact of the matter is there's lots of things to change, lots of things to happen. I actually think, from my experience anyway, that the progression of the artist is incredibly fast compared to, other traditional professions. And doctors don't rise to the top in 2 years, nor do that. So no, I would say simply you've got a good. It's what's good about this industry in many ways is that because it still is a young industry, there is still the ability to you don't have old people like me sitting around saying, well, prove yourself yet. There are others older than me and they're around, but I'm sort of saying I am at the old end of the spectrum. There are so many people in the 30s sort of range, and all those people are also getting there. So no, I would say seriously, you got it good right now. The people below you are not going to go up very fast at all because there's too many people. Maybe that's my answer. But the other thing about creativity is years don't actually mean you're better. It actually, in terms of ability to make an image, some people have straight out potentially more ability. And some of that is the artistic ability over being organised. So I think a lot like architecture, the design architects show themselves very early, but the project managers tend to show themselves as being good a bit later down the track. So I think overall it's different, but seriously, what's the rush? That is what I would say. I guess it's easy for me to say. I started this business when I was 31 years old, but there was no alternative for me. There was no other place to go and work. At that point in time, I was running it was one of only places, and there was no alternative apart from going overseas. Going to a Neoscape or a D-Box or something. But the opportunity presented itself back then. It is very different now. There are plenty of places you can try to learn new things. So.
Talking about D-Box, I'm still trying to convince Matthew to get on board with the interview. He's on my list for this year. But he's a very busy guy, so it's. But I've had the pleasure to meet him this year at the D2 conference. Super nice guy, and my dream is one day to bring all of the big guys together and just do some sort of anniversary celebration for the archivist industry.
I think it was good. I saw the guys at D-Box and a couple others at the Wireframes opening in Los Angeles a month ago or a few weeks ago. I spent a lot of time. And what's good about this interview actually is that around about this time, that particular exhibition was organised by Kilograph and amongst others, and say Jeff Mottle at CG Architect. It was an ability for me to actually reflect back on 20 years of work. I actually literally used it as a sort of making a panel. I'm looking at photography, and that was my curatorial part of the project, was to look at the history of photography and how it's applied into this field. And so I had the opportunity to go over there and have a bit of a chat, and it is great when you get a chance to actually talk to some of these people, especially the ones that have been working for quite a while. But what that did is I got to go and look back at 20 years of work and realise that this is the highlights, this is the moment. So anyway, the timing's been good for me to have done this reflection prior to talking to you now. So there you go.
Daniel,
and if anyone does want to go and see that, they should go and see that if they're in LA. I actually thought it was
absolutely.
an amazing idea. It was just the idea that there's a moment in time where you think, well, how do you look at the history of this industry and how it's developed, and then look at the studios that are actually have shown that. And it is a really interesting idea that it's actually happened at all. So I'm just really happy to be involved.
So basically, this is the last question. I want to ask you, since the effort of making these videos is to inspire others to do more and better, especially the younger generations, as very often is pointed out that the youngers are actually those who sometimes manage to, bring negativity to the industry because they lower prices, they don't establish laws, and they sell themselves to the mercy of clients that don't really care. They're just trying to take advantage of them. So I would like you to first of all to tell me if there is something that you think that the youngest generation are still not understanding about this industry, if at all, and therefore, your advice to them.
Look, I think there's a lot of models about how you build these businesses. I mean, I've watched things. I've watched these companies rise and fall around me over a period of time, and I guess look, the realities of starting any sort of work. I mean, there's no work industry in the world where the young people aren't doing the work from the back garage and therefore charging a lot less, or in their living room and they're charging freelancers and those sorts of things. I actually see the problem that you're describing as a lot more problematic in established larger firms who are happy to sell their children to get the job, and then deliver variable outcomes, because what it does is that it lowers expectations across the industry. It lowers that trust option that you get from loyal clients because they expect that behaviour from everybody. So what I would recommend everyone, I mean, as an industry, I think the real overall issue is I guess the lack of cohesiveness. There's a lack of understanding of being good corporate citizens. There's a lack of feeling that you should how you affect your competitor will affect you as well. And so I don't begrudge starting out people undercharging outcomes. They need to build the client base. Now, if they're getting enough to feed themselves, then that's sort of what they need to do. It's when they get to the next step, when you've got 3 or 4 that idea that undercutting and causing a whole bunch of I've steadfastly remained true. I call myself the McDonald's in Australia, where our charge rates for stills are the same in every city, whereas others tend to vary depending on what they think. And the reason I'm consistent is because I'm saying I've got a consistent quality, and I'm not going to turn around and give you bad artists versus good artists versus whatever. And that process is sort of very important to me. So I'd say as I say, I don't begrudge that. I do think the expectation of fast growth that you were talking about just before is more from a young person's point of view. Seriously, what's the rush? I get it that you want to have a sports car, but overall, you need to realise that a bit of patience and time means in 3, 4, 5 years' time you'll be in a much stronger position to create difference and change. You aren't just reacting and doing all the small jobs. I mean, I guess. Whilst we still do jobs where there's only one still, for example. I know others don't do that, and that's not to compete against those small people. It's just simply, well, we do people favours, as in we still charge the same, but we still do that work because at the end of the day, that client relationship is really important. And I guess one other point I want to make: when people do manage it, it's when you agree to unreasonable expectations from clients, then all you're asking for is even worse behaviour the next time. And people actually respect people respect, they may not like it, but they respect the fact that you stand your ground. And next time they come back to you, they'll treat you a whole lot better. And that is all. That will be the only mission, the only thing I would say overall. And always treat people right, and always not do as they say so much as interpret what they say and create the right outcomes. So the standing the ground thing I think is really quite important. It's because as they say, give them an inch, they take a mile, and you need to be aware. And if you give them an inch, then they'll take a mile from me. The other one I have a real particular issue over is the idea of not so much job splitting, but one person doing one image and then another firm doing three more on one project allows clients to effectively use one against the other. And I think overall, people should be a bit more forthright of saying, "This is my project. This is the work I'm doing. It represents my brand. It represents my work, and I don't want it to be." Compared either favourably or unfavourably with someone else's, because in the end I stand on my own 2 feet. And I think there just needs to be a little bit more of that in relation to how people start their work out. Anyway, it's easy for me to say, but I think, and to be honest, I didn't really have the issue, because when I came to play, or came out and started a business, I effectively continued on one that was already running for 5 years, and I never really had that moment where I went out and I had to do it by myself in a room. I was always there with 3 or 4 people to start with, and I think, believe me, I think this difference between being out by yourself and being out with 3 or 4 people, that step from 1 to 4 is actually the hard one. So I think, that's probably how I'd end that comment.
Daniel, first of all, I want to thank you very much for taking the time. I really hope that this interview will be heard, especially from the younger ones, because I think that you gave me a lot of value and very good inputs for those who are thinking to go inside this business or even for those who are already running their business and they find themselves in these 2 ways where they don't know where they have to go and they don't know how to make the next move. And I think I got a lot from you. For that, I'm very thankful.
I think I would like to just quickly add that fortitude, that sort of strength, and trying to build that longevity is something that I think it's been, back to the fear factor, I think it's being threatened by certain people at the moment. I think the ability to sell, I think that's actually is in a sense my major fear, is that that overall my ability to do good work is being eroded by other people chasing a buck. So I just think we need to think of ourselves as a profession, not as a gut reacting money creation scheme. And I think from that point of view, I mean, look, it sounds horribly naive actually what I'm saying. It's just not how the world works. But it'd be good if we could be dentists and just, we'd walk in and everyone say, they ask, do I need fillings? And they say it and you do it. And there's a respect factor in relation to being a professional as opposed to being someone who just makes stuff on the slicer. I guess that's really a really strong point about it, is I would actually like the industry and the artists and the young ones and everyone else to really see themselves as working into a profession as opposed to working into that sort of, just making a pretty picture. I often say that word, I make pretty pictures. It's self-deprecating, but it's also not true. I think the worst picture, the least important pictures we make are still things that have value and still things that I would like to see valued more by the general community. And the only way to do that is for this particular industry to drive that forward. And I don't think we're doing enough to do that right now. So
that's a little bit our mission with the D2 conference. We try to push people, and from time to time we do hear success stories of people that say, we did what we heard at the D2, we implemented it, and now things are much better. We're growing, we're doing this and we're doing that. It's just that the problem, it's very difficult to bring the whole community to the D2.
Yeah, sure. I know. Okay.
Daniel, thanks a lot again for doing this. I'm gonna stop the recording. I'm gonna say goodbye to you in a second. Don't go anywhere. Sure. If you wanna say goodbye to people, this is your time.
Bye everyone. Been fabulous talking to you. Okay, we'll go.